Welcome to the More Perfect Union, a podcast about the joy we get from American politics. Real debate without the hate. My name is Greg Matuzak. I'll be your liberal Democrat from Cincinnati, Ohio.
I'm DJ from Suffolk, Virginia, and I'm your conservative libertarian.
Hi, I'm Emily Brewer, and I'm your moderate Republican from Virginia.
And I'm Kevin Kelton, living in Los Angeles, and I am your moderate Democrat for this week's festivities.
You can find us on the web at moreperfectunionpodcast.com. Plus, there's lots of blogs, commentaries, pictures, memes. That's what all the kids are into now. And you can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/moreperfectunionpodcast. Please take time to rate and review us on iTunes. It will bring you good karma. And please share our link on your Facebook newsfeed. Whew! Now that that's out of the way. Now we should get down to the really important thing that we've all been waiting for. Because at the end of last week's episode, which I know everyone's been talking about, we made predictions. And I don't want to say that I was completely right, but let's face it.
Let me say it.
I was completely right.
Greg, you were completely right.
I was completely right when I said Hillary was not going to be indicted this week. And everyone was going to talk about it. And I don't want to break my arm by patting myself on the back, but it's in a sling, so let's just say that.
Well, you were right that she wasn't indicted legally, but boy, Director James Comey certainly indicted her character.
Boy, and how? Well, first, how did the right side of the room feel about this? Emily, how did you feel about her not being indicted?
I mean, I'm not going to lose sleep over it at all. I think it's a bad situation, and I think that technology-wise, a lot of people have probably done this that we don't even know about, and I doubt she's the only person. Doesn't make it right, especially, obviously, with high security clearance, but, I think the biggest concern is that even though she wasn't indicted, I think that there needs a protocol and signed statements or something, but these people just don't do this, because, it wasn't a smart idea. Can anyone disagree with that?
No, of course it was not a smart idea.
No, it was not her wisest moment, no.
But, here's the thing that nobody's really talking about. And again, I know everybody says, well, Kevin, you're in love with Hillary. You always come to her defense. Both are true.
You are in love with Hillary.
Both are true.
You always do come in.
Too bad she's married. But anyways, when she became Secretary of State, she was like 61, 62 years old. Email was still not that prevalent. Now, for those of us who were somewhat younger, yes, we've been using it. We've been using it in work since about 2004, 2005. But, to people over 60 at that time, it was still a little bit of a mystery. And I'm not saying that she shouldn't have known better. I'm not saying that what she did was right. But, again, when it comes down to the real numbers, we're talking about 3 emails that had a C marking in the body of the text. She should have been able to read that and know that that meant this portion is classified. For whatever reason, she made the mistake or somebody made the mistake with those and it got through her system. I'll bet you that if you did a government-wide analysis of how people are using email, including all of the cabinet secretaries, I'll bet you'd find a lot of people who have made mistakes on a par with or greater than that.
I'm going to have to disagree with you there, because I think we're missing a large part of what this is about. I've said this before, and I'm saying it again. This is not just about Mrs. Clinton per se, although since she's running for president, the focus has been largely on her. This has been about essentially the rest of the national security apparatus taking some hide out of the State Department. The State Department has been appallingly lax on this sort of thing. It's been lax before she took office. It's been lax since she has left. The thing that was most important out of what Director Comey said is what no one will talk about, or mostly no one will talk about, because it doesn't focus on her, and that was the culture of carelessness in the State Department itself. The Defense Department, where I've had some experience as a contractor, treats this far more seriously than the State Department ever does. And it treats it far more seriously than any other department in the government. Mrs. Clinton was careless. The director stated that. Mrs. Clinton also, frankly, has been dishonest in what she told the public about this sort of thing. I'll get to that later. But this is about the State Department and how the State Department treats information, and that will have greater impact in how Washington operates long after Mrs. Clinton serves for 1 or 2 terms.
All right.
All right. Two-part question, and this goes back to the main topic, which was me being right. Were you guys surprised by this, by the indictment, by not being indicted? And 2, were you guys surprised then by the GOP leadership's next move, the reaction of hauling Comey in front of Congress? Were you guys surprised by this? By those 2 things?
I was surprised by neither. One, because, again, and this is something I've seen from a lot of people who had experience in the Defense Department who really were genuinely upset because, again, the Defense Department treats us far more seriously than anyone else. But as this was not a Defense Department issue, I did not expect any sort of indictment from the civil justice system. Had this been the Defense Department and the military justice system were involved, this might have been very different.
And what about you, Emily? What do you think about this ongoing another hearing? And there's hearings upon the hearings now.
I mean, I've got to be honest. Do I think it's an issue? Yes. Will it be a problem for her during her campaign? Yes. But it's kind of getting to the point of jumping the shark, I think, at this point, because it's just been beat up so badly. And I think it's been handled poorly from a PR perspective from the GOP side. But, I think that it boils down to this. Even if Hillary didn't know better about the whole email situation, she has a lot of damn people under her that should have.
Okay, so we can woulda, coulda, shoulda. We all agree that she made mistakes. The question now is, what long-term damage is this going to have on her campaign, especially since there's rumors abounding that Bernie Sanders is going to endorse her, possibly Tuesday or Wednesday of this week. So how does this all, play out? How does it pan out in terms of the longer campaign?
Well, there's one bill.
It doesn't.
There's a congressional one congressman who's trying to get Hillary's security clearance pulled.
Right, and that won't go anyplace. So,
but it's another
scandal, and now they want to open another congressional investigation about her perjuring herself.
Right.
What this will do is that this will ensure, although I was pretty sure it was going to happen anyway, that Mrs. Clinton will not reach 50% of the vote. Like her husband, she will be a plurality president rather than a majority president. She will not get 50% of the vote. Trump won't get to 40, so he won't be anywhere near her. But it is just this will be just another reason why a majority of American voters will vote for someone else. They'll vote for someone else's. They'll vote for multiple someone else's. But she will not get to 50% of the popular vote, and this is just another reason why she won't get there.
Well,
Outside of that, not much.
That's a really good point, and it touches on a very important issue that I'm glad DJ brought up, because there is a difference between a president who has a majority of the popular vote, whether it's 51 or 53%, versus a president who comes in at 49 or 48%. There is a very big difference. And DJ, you're absolutely right that, if because we're going to have robust third-party and or fourth-party candidates this year, and because there may be, people on the winning side, whether the winning side is Trump or whether the winning side is Clinton, there may be people in that person's party who withhold their votes from their party's candidate. You're going to have we're going to make ruling the country much harder. And frankly, although I totally respect where you're coming from, DJ, in terms of supporting the third-party candidate, Gary Johnson, or where Emily is coming from, where she doesn't know yet whether she's going to vote or not, or who she'll vote for, and it probably won't be Trump. The problem is that I think that makes governing in the United States of America much harder. I know it works in Britain. I know it works in other countries where they have 2 or 3 parties, and people can pull together a coalition with 35, 40, 45% support. But in this country, boy, that's going to really make things hard on whoever the next president is.
I was going to say is obviously I think we all know that we're in a cycle that will turn over again and again in politics, and we just so happen to be in a year where we have candidates like Bernie and Trump that are just, very much out there. They're, like the world on fire type candidates, and often in a negative way or in a very different way. And I think we will cycle through where we get back to candidates with a bit more statesman-like feel to them. I think it's just going to take time.
Can I just go on record as saying, and again, you can make fun of me all you want, that I think that Hillary Clinton is statesman-like and is a statesman.
Yes, I agree.
She delivered a speech the day after the Dallas shootings, which we'll get into in a minute, and I thought she was masterful. Now, I posted it online in my debate group, Open Fire, which, by the way, everybody check it out if you want to find a great political debate group on Facebook, Open Fire. We talked about it there, and again, the people that don't like her see her as being monotone, having a horrible delivery, not being capable of soaring rhetoric. I think she presents an informed, an intelligent, a thoughtful, an empathetic, and a very competent leadership quality in her speeches and in the way she approaches the issues. And I just reject this view of a lesser of two evils. From the very beginning of this campaign, I have been a proud Hillary Clinton supporter, and I will proudly vote for her.
I guess we're kind of hesitating because the next thing on our list is really rough. We have a sheet that we're going for segments, and I guess I'm kind of hesitating, but I guess we have to. And there's been a lot of violence that's, I would love to say, is unprecedented in this country, but it's not. But it seems to be getting more and more so. And this week we saw two horrible police shootings, and then a horrific shooting of police officers at a protest in Dallas. And with social media, we're now actually seeing them almost as they're occurring through videos, and they're now they're in our houses. Where instead of just being, newscasters telling us about these things, we're seeing them as they happen, and it's making everything a lot more real for those of us who live in the suburbs. And which, not saying that they didn't happen before, but it's this urgency, and it's horrible. Not that it wasn't before, but we're now seeing it more and more.
It was truly an amazing week, and one thing I can almost guarantee is that the summer of 2016 will go down in history like the summer of '68 and the Watts riots of '67. This will be a flashpoint in history. Don't you guys agree?
Oh yeah.
One thing I think we should note by this is something that George Orwell missed. Big Brother is not necessarily watching us as much as it is being watched by us. And I think, and getting back to Baton Rouge and Baton Heights, we are now watching our governments, local governments in particular, because that's where law enforcement gets its power from. They are being observed in an up-close manner far more than they were in the past. And the fact that we can now see them, the fact that we can see them up close and that we cannot avoid them, I hope it means that we can take from it and look to start making the changes where they need to be, which is at our local governments. This is not something that Washington is going to fix. This is not something that state capitals can fix. This is something that engagement with your local authorities can fix. Police departments are accountable to local elected officials, and they're accountable to local voters. It was the city council elections in Ferguson in 2015 that began to change the attitude of that city's government. It will be our recognition that local governments tend to be to revenue-generating efforts, including within their law enforcement departments, that will lead to changes at the local government level. And I hope, and I genuinely hope, that what we take from this is okay, yes, changes need to be made, but we need to make sure we recognize where the changes have to be made. Because a bunch of regulations and laws out of Washington means maybe localities will feel the pressure in 3 to 4 to 5 years after all the bureaucrats dot the I's and cross the T's and everything else. If we show up at city council meetings, if we show up at county board of supervisor meetings, if we show up at those meetings this week, then city officials will see the need for change this week. They won't have to wait from Washington because they'll hear from their local constituents, which are namely us. So yes, this was a very bad week. It was a horrible week. It was a violent week, and it shouldn't have been. But let's at least learn from this and say,
real. Let's talk what's really wrong. We have a race relations problem in our country that, I'm just feeling now because I grew up in a bubble not understanding that this was a thing. And now it is. And we have a big problem and we need to solve it.
Well, you're absolutely right. We do. What I've been playing with in my head and discussing with my friends is, I totally acknowledge and have for most of my life that there's major racism in this country that we kid ourselves into thinking we are beyond or that goes unaddressed. In the problem of policing, I do think there's systemic racism in many police departments. But I think that all we can do is talk about that. It's very hard to change. It takes decades and decades to change the way people interact with each other. What we can change now is policing. My personal feeling is we need to relook at this idea of our police force as an invading force that stops motorists on a regular basis, that stops people on a regular basis. We need to go back to the premise of police solving crimes, not out there somehow putting up a blue wall to stop crime from happening. This idea of pulling over motorists because a tail light is out, or because they forgot to signal a lane change, or because their license plate is not exactly on correctly. We have to get away from that. We have to have many, many, many less confrontations between the police and the citizenry. And when I say confrontation, I'm not talking about a fist fight that leads to a shooting. I'm saying let's stop these situations at the core. There is no reason, unless somebody is going 90 miles an hour, there is no reason for a police car to turn on his lights and pull over a motorist. Take down the license plate, send them a moving violation like we do with traffic lights. Okay? Send them a violation for not having a working blinker. There is no reason to turn that into a confrontation. And the other problem is, and I went through this, you guys have probably read the article I wrote several years ago after Michael Brown was shot and killed about how I was once stopped by the police, but for the love of, the luck of God, I didn't get shot to death. And I happen to be Caucasian. It's about the way police stop and approach and handle people in their cars. This man who got shot in, I believe it was Falcon Heights this week, it's because the officer said,
that's what I believe it was, yes.
Show me your driver's license, and he reached for his driver's license. We have to stop that problem. Going back to Amadou Diallo, am I pronouncing his name correctly, DJ? You would know.
Amadou Diallo.
Thank you.
And I'm glad you mentioned him.
Who was shot 41 times
that
for reaching for his wallet. Okay? We have to get away. This is the craziest thing in the world. Police tell you to reach for something, you do it, and they shoot you. And then they say, we thought he was going for a gun.
And it was probably the fact that because that went to trial.
Oh, yeah.
And a multiracial jury acquitted him.
They acquit them all.
And that was probably they don't necessarily acquit them all, but they acquitted him.
Okay. Well,
that was
up until Amadou Diallo, they didn't acquit them all. There was I think it was Abner Louima,
yes,
the Haitian immigrant who was brutalized by just a year earlier.
Right.
Those guys were not acquitted.
Right.
Right.
Those cops are
But
not equipped.
there was an article this week in on Red State. Did anyone see it?
No.
The gist of the article was, if we saw police officers who did these acts, and we see these acts, they're on video at this point, if we saw them actually get in trouble, and I'm not talking about the ones that are the cameras off, but that we're like, no, this was not right. This was not procedure, right? The 1.7 seconds where they pull up and they shoot a child up in Cleveland.
Yeah.
That wasn't right. And then there was one up in Dayton too, where they ran up on a 21-year-old. These things, if the community would see sometimes police officers get punished, but they never do, then perhaps they wouldn't have this fear and this apprehension every time that they got pulled over. And it's that kind of, if we had faith in the legal system, perhaps there wouldn't be this terror that's going on right now. Like, these men are above the law, or these people, excuse me.
That's true.
Which they are.
Well,
and the fact that a conservative site said that, shows me that there's a fundamental shift that, looks like everybody's getting this message now.
We have to actually ask ourselves, maybe there is actually a third race in this discussion, and that race is blue.
Absolutely.
Maybe blue itself is a race.
That is a great point.
We need to look at that also. We have, and this is probably something that certainly that Kevin would actually remember more than Greg and I would, because he's a little older. There was a period, that folks mentioned 1968. The decade after 1968 was probably the decade where the American people chose to put as much power into their local police forces as they have now, because of the dramatic increase in crime that was either seen or perceived, depending on the numbers say it was seen, not perceived. But that changed. I think that helped change a lot of attitudes and gave us the incentive to give police the additional powers and the additional trust that now in 2016 we're thinking may not necessarily be a good idea. And you can actually see it. I've seen some of the debates in the discussions I've had and the emails I'll go back and forth. People who remember, I've always said there are two kinds of people who will have this discussion. What I call ordinary Americans and people who remember David Dinkins. And that's not necessarily fair to the former mayor. But it was really during his time as mayor of New York, 90 to 94, that the impression for those of us who lived and grew up in the New York area, the impression that the city had become an ungovernable mess. And you can tell in the reactions, even in the reactions to Ferguson in 2014, when Rand Paul went hardcore against police power, and Ted Cruz, who went to Princeton in the 1990s and was a little closer to New York City, was not quite willing to follow him. I wasn't quite willing to follow him at that point. I'm a little more worried about it now. When Eric Garner was killed, not only was there no indictments brought, but the DA, who could not bring an indictment against him, was elected to Congress from Staten Island, the very place where Gardner was killed. There are still people who are traumatized by the crime wave of the late 20th century. And it is what we are seeing is the legacy of that. And again, I said it a few minutes ago, and I still think it. This is something that has to be dealt with at the local level, because local police forces are accountable to local voters. The rest of us outside of Ferguson do not have the impact on the Ferguson Police Department that the Ferguson voters are having and have had. And what we need to do is we need to look and say, okay, what's happening in our police department?
I worked a bipartisan race a couple years ago, maybe 8-9 years ago, and it was in conjunction with the sheriff's department. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever worked on a sheriff's race or anything. It wasn't.
I managed one.
Oh, you've managed one. Okay, so you work with a lot of police, right? And it was the only race that my father ever told me not to get involved in. Okay, my father's a very funny guy. Won't get started on that. But I said, well, why? He goes, you don't want to get involved because you don't want to work with police. And my father's pretty straight guy. He's not, And I said, what are you talking about? This could be the greatest thing ever. I'll get out of tickets. I'll, blah blah blah. He goes, that's not it. He goes, there are two types of people in the police world. You're either with them, you're a police officer, or you're a police family, or you're a criminal. And it was true because we would be sitting around, me and the guys, and and then all of a sudden, someone would walk by, and they'd all shush, and they'd all look at each other, and they'd put their cop gaze on this guy. And it could be like a teenager, it could be a black teenager, it could be a white, older man, and they'd all stare him down. And I'd be like, what's going on, guys? And they go, we're just making sure everything's cool. Right. And I'd be like, what? Kids just walk into school. Yeah. And he goes, that's what they want you to think.
But you guys have to also think that they live in a world where they've become a bit cynical sometimes because, if, 9 times out of 10 your day goes great, but that one time something goes wrong, it sticks with you, So...
Well, it sticks with you, but it sticks with everybody.
Yeah, but here's the thing, Emily. Yes, they're only human, and yes, they see things that we don't see, and they have a view of society that I could never have, not doing their work. But that's their job, is to overcome that, is to not let that make them jaded. I mean, I want to talk about another police killing for a moment that you guys may or may not be familiar with. This, and I'm blanking on his name now, I'm so mad, but his last name is Thomas. He's a homeless guy, schizophrenic, who was beaten to death, not shot, beaten to death by the police in a suburb of Los Angeles. But they have videotape of the 2 police officers approaching this guy who was clearly homeless, out of it, he had no shirt on, and they turned this confrontation into a violent murder for no reason at all. But you could see the hate in their voices and in the way they talked to him from the very beginning of the confrontation. And there's one point where the police officer, one of the 2 police officers, is telling him to straighten his legs. He's sitting on the curb, on the ground, hands spread out, so he's of no danger to these guys. But his legs are straight ahead of him, crossed. And the police officer is saying, bend your legs and straighten them out. And for whatever reason, this guy didn't do it. The police officer starts to put on rubber surgical gloves. And as he's saying them, he's saying, I am going to F you up. And he didn't say the letter F. And this was before anything happened. This guy had already made a decision that he was going to beat the living daylights out of this human being, simply because he wouldn't put his legs the way the police officer wanted it.
Kelly Thomas.
Kelly Thomas.
His name was Kelly Thomas.
That is it. Thank you for...
Google is very helpful.
Yes.
May I ask you a question, Kevin?
Yes.
Was this, as you were in Los Angeles area and the rest of us are not, was this an issue in the 2013 mayoral campaign?
I believe it was. I will tell you that the Kelly Thomas case was a big issue in the Southern California area. People here knew about it. I know it may not have been national, but it was on talk radio. It was in the news. Everyone knew about it, or most everyone knew about it.
Okay, because again, the quickest place for resolution, the quickest place for resolution, I should say, because this is not something that can be resolved. Mr. Thomas is dead, sadly.
Yes.
Is there at the local level. It's an issue where, for that kind of lax oversight, a mayor should be questioned. Because if memory serves, the mayor appoints the police chief in Los Angeles.
I'll interrupt you. There was a recall election because of this for city council members. For 3 city council members were recalled because of this.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Three city council, because of this exact in June of 2012, 3 city council members were recalled exactly because of this.
Yeah, because they stood up for the police. Now, the police were tried. I believe, I'm not 100% sure, I believe they were all acquitted.
They were all acquitted, but Kelly Thomas's father sued
Right.
and got a $4.9 million settlement. They were fired, and from both of them were fired and not allowed to be rehired, or fired from being rehired, excuse me, is the term. And they are no longer working for LA.
Right. This was the White Eric Gardner case, because basically what happened, it was the same thing. The police decided they needed to subdue someone who wasn't armed. They jumped on him, and eventually this guy couldn't breathe anymore and he died. Okay? It was very similar to what happened to Eric Gardner. Which brings me back to my point, which is that, yes, there is, as Emily has rightly pointed out, a huge racial component in this. But if we can just change policing, we're not going to do away with racism in the next 25 years. Let's be realistic. We can reduce it. We can open people's minds to the fact that it still exists, but it's not going away. But what we can do... Okay, go ahead.
You know what the biggest problem is I know you guys are a little bit older than me. You know, I was born in '84, and from a millennial perspective, the only thing that I remember that was just so egregious, you know, growing up was Rodney King. I remember that pretty vividly. I was pretty young. But ever since then, until the past 2 years or so, I've never really noticed or seen this side of our country. And it's pretty heartbreaking. But I think the other problem is that we haven't talked about our history enough to come full circle to realize this could happen again. And, you know, when I was growing up, I didn't experience, or maybe social media made this worse, I don't know, but I never felt like I experienced this. It's such a heartbreaking scenario to just see what's happening to our country. And I don't remember the 70s or 80s.
Emily, I would say, Emily, that is, and as someone who is recently new to the city that we now both share, Suffolk, Virginia, Suffolk, Virginia is a very unusual place, and I say that in a very glowing and praiseworthy manner. Suffolk is not a perfect place. I don't mean to say that, but frankly, the relations between white Suffolk residents and African American Suffolk residents are far more cooperative and far more respectful than what I have seen in northern New Jersey, northern Virginia, even Williamsburg, Virginia. It is really, really different here in this city. When you have the African American precincts that we have seen overwhelmingly reject an African American challenger for a white incumbent on the city council, which is what we saw here in Suffolk. That is really very, very rare. That kind of cooperation and building of trust, if you will. The rest of the country, with the possibility of other isolated pockets, which I do not know, we actually have seen conflicts at local levels and things over the last 20 to 25 years. But Suffolk is different. Trust me, Suffolk is different from the rest of the country in a lot of good ways.
Okay, can I jump in here because we are running, towards the end of our time, and I just want to wrap up this segment and leave time to talk about Donald Trump. But let me just say two things. One is I'm going to post at some point this week, hopefully by tomorrow, I'm going to post the video of the Kelly Thomas murder, and I call it murder, on the moreperfectunionpodcast.com page. So if anybody's never seen it, it's very long, but you should really watch at least a portion of it to get a sense of what we're talking about. And the other thing that I just want to say, I know you guys all agree with me, but I think we really have to say it out loud for people to acknowledge that we also truly appreciate our police forces and the 5 men who lost their lives in Dallas on Thursday night, and the other 7 who were wounded, plus 2,
no doubt,
bystanders. Our first responders in this country are amazing. I always feel better when I see an officer in a restaurant or near me. I appreciate what they do, just like I appreciate the brave soldiers who represent us both overseas and in the United States. And I just don't want anybody listening to this podcast to think that we don't, because we do appreciate the risk that they take, the valor that they show, and we know that by far, 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 they would all do the right thing in any given circumstance. Unfortunately, their profession is somewhat sullied by a very small fraction of the people that put on that uniform. And with that, I just want to give us a few moments to talk about Donald Trump this week. We talked about Hillary Clinton, but there is another person in the race. Trump has 1 week to go before his big convention starts up. Emily, you're going to be there. Guys, what are you looking for this week and then the following week during the convention?
Oh, I think this week, I'll start because I'm on a roll. I think I think this week, hopefully I'm going to make a plea that there will be no more violence. But two, I think this is the week that Trump is going to get everyone in line, and he's going to say, look, you're either with me or you're against me, and if you're against me, hand in those magic tickets because you're not getting into the chocolate factory. And that's that. So, and I think he's got every right to. Every other presumptive nominee has pretty much set the stage and said, look, this is my show. This is, no, you don't want to endorse me? Go sit outside with the other losers or whatever. And that's what he's going, everyone's going to be like, do I want to dance or not? Well, that's what this is going to be.
Emily, you're going to be there. What are you hearing? What are you anticipating? And what are you hoping for? And what are your worst fears for the Republican National Convention?
I got to be honest. So we've been getting emails from so many different people that are giving us advice on what not to wear. So we're being told not to wear our credentials, to not be targets. We're being told not to wear badges or lapels. We're told if we're driving that we need to take bumper stickers off our cars so they don't get vandalized like they were, I guess, during the last convention that I happened. So,
that's not funny.
It's funny enough because it happens at the Democratic convention too. And pardon the French, this shit's got to stop. That's ridiculous. We're a country based on being a free people, and we need to act like it and let people, have their opinions and their differences.
I just had a conversation with someone this morning about how his civil rights to drive on the road were being interfered with other people's rights, other people protesting. And I explained, I was like, a civil right to drive on a road isn't actually a civil right. And he goes, no, I have a civil right. And I said, I don't think that's a civil right. I don't think that's in the Constitution. Protesting is. And this was an argument we had. But he was like, no, it's a civil right.
I think the key is going to be the Rules Committee. The Rules Committee meets this week. And if there is any attempt to get the rules changed, it would start there. I don't think they have the numbers to do it. So I think this is largely going to sort of just fizzle away. And I can understand the concern because right now things are uncertain. But absent an attempt to let the delegates nominate no one, which would be their best move, but that's not going to happen.
Not going to happen.
It's just going to be no. It's going to. I know, but it's if they're not going to do that, I don't think they're going to get the support on the Rules Committee to unbound the delegates or even to propose it. And it's just going to be a very interesting time in Cleveland. But once it becomes clear that Trump is unstoppable, and I think it will be clear this week, then much of the concern for next week, I think, will largely fade.
Okay, well,
but that's just me.
We're on time here, so Greg, you want to take us home with predictions?
I made my prediction already. I think we're going to see dancing girls and casino gambling, and I think it's going to be the Trumpiest Trump show of them all. What do you guys think?
Well, I predict that we're going to see Bernie Sanders vocally and enthusiastically endorse Hillary Clinton in person in a big venue, and you're going to have lots of Bernie or bust people saying he's been drugged, he's been bribed, they've threatened to kill him. That's not really Bernie's words.
Oh, that's a great prediction. I wish I took that one.
Emily?
Damn you, Kevin. Damn you, Kevin. That's what I was picking. I was actually going to pick that he's going to come out probably Thursday or Friday and endorse Hillary.
But anyways, with that, I think we have to wrap it up. Greg?
Well, with that, I'm supposed to say something.
Well, please remember to find us on the web at moreperfectunionpodcast.com, where we have blogs and commentary. Greg, you take it from there.
No, I can't. I don't have any lines.
Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/moreperfectunion. Rate and review us on iTunes. Please share our link on your Facebook newsfeed and tell your friends and family to listen to us. And most importantly, write down Greg's predictions and check every day to see if they come true. And with that, we say it's been a fun podcast. Thank you for listening, and we will see you in here.